Today I'm going to be explaining the motor unit, which is made up of the motor neuron and the muscle fiber. So we're going to go over each of these individually and we're going to see how they work together. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the motor neuron. So if we look at the brain, we know that the spinal cord is attached and it runs down the length of our body. If we take out a section of this and we look at it bigger, we can see where the motor neuron is. So the cell body of the motor neuron is located in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. So this is where the brain of the neuron is. And from here, its axon will branch out and go to the periphery of the body, and it will branch out and it will attach to the muscle fibers, which we'll talk about soon. So let's take a bigger look at this neuron so we can see how the signal is sent and how it communicates. So if I were to draw that neuron in a bigger picture, here we have the cell body, we have the axon that's coming away from the cell body and carrying the signal, and then we have the axon terminal. So what's going to happen is the signal is going to come from the CNS. It's going to create a signal in the cell body. And it's going to send a signal down the axon. When it reaches the axon terminal, which is the end of the axon, there's these things called vesicles. These vesicles are holding neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are just chemicals in our body that are used for communication. So here we have the end of the motor neuron. And on the other side, we're going to have the muscle fiber. So how these two are going to communicate is the motor neuron, when this signal reaches the end, it's going to release these neurotransmitters. In the motor neuron, these transmitters are called acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is going to be released, and it's going to travel across this cleft. This is called the synaptic cleft. So these two, this neuron and this muscle fiber, are never actually touching, but they're very close, and they communicate through this chemical messenger called acetylcholine, or ACH. So what's going to happen is the muscle fiber is going to have receptors on it waiting for the acetylcholine. So when acetylcholine binds to one of these receptors, it's going to open some channels. This is going to allow for some ions, some positive ions, to move into the muscle fiber. When the positive ions move into the muscle fiber, this is going to cause a depolarization. So this cell is becoming more positive than the negative outside. So this is more positive and the outside is more negative, and that's called depolarization. If it reaches a certain point, called the threshold, it's going to cause an action potential. So when this action potential is reached, this is going to allow for calcium to be released. So we're going to look at the muscle fiber now. So let's take a closer look at the muscle fiber. So the muscle fiber is made up of little components called myofibrils. And what's what's going to happen is when that action potential occurs within the muscle fiber, it's going to travel all the way down into the myofibril. So the signal has been sent here. And what's going to happen is that the sarcoplasmic reticulum, so sarcoplasmic reticulum is going to be all around this myofibril. We're going to call it SR for short. It's going to be able to release calcium. So now it's going to release calcium. Calcium is coming from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And when that happens, the calcium is going to be able to bind to the actin in the myofibril, and that's going to allow for the sliding filament cascade to occur. When the sliding filament cascade occurs, that's when the muscle can lengthen and shorten, causing contractions. So that is how the connection between the muscle fiber and the motor neuron works, and that is called the motor unit.